The setting sun painted the sky in brilliant hues of orange and purple as it descended behind the ancient trees of Okafor village. Located in the heart of southeastern Nigeria, this village had stood for generations, its people bound together by traditions as old as the earth beneath their feet. Among these customs, one particular practice had endured through decades of change. No footwear was ever to be left outside after nightfall. Each evening, as the sun began its descent, villagers would hurry to gather their sandals, shoes, and slippers, bringing them safely inside their homes. Children were taught this tradition from the moment they could walk, and visitors were promptly informed upon arrival. The elders spoke of this custom in hushed tones, their eyes distant with the weight of ancient knowledge passed down through generations. In this village lived families who had never questioned why they rushed to collect their footwear each evening. Young ones grew up watching their parents and grandparents perform this ritual with unwavering dedication. Even as electricity arrived and mobile phones became commonplace, this one tradition remained steadfast and unbroken, until the return of Peter Okafor. Peter had left Okafor as a teenager, bright-eyed and ambitious, carrying nothing but dreams and his father's blessings. That was 30 years ago. Now, at 52, he had built a life that his younger self could only have imagined. In America, he had found success as a software engineer, married a beautiful woman named Sandra, and raised 2 children, Junior, aged 15, and Mary, who had just turned 12. The decision to return home for Christmas had come suddenly, sparked by a photograph of his childhood home that his cousin had sent via WhatsApp. The image stirred something deep within Peter, memories of palm wine festivals, of his mother's egusi soup, of evening tales by the firelight. His children had never seen their ancestral home, had never tasted the sweet mangoes that grew wild behind his father's compound, had never heard the stories that made their heritage so rich. When Peter announced their trip to his family, Sandra had been supportive but apprehensive. An African-American woman who had never traveled to Nigeria, she had spent months preparing, reading books about Igbo culture, learning basic phrases, and asking Peter endless questions about village life. Junior and Mary shared their mother's mixture of excitement and nervousness, their understanding of Nigeria limited to the stories their father told and the Nollywood movies they occasionally watched. Their arrival in Okafor caused quite a stir. Land cruisers were rare in the village, and the sight of one carrying a successful son returning home drew crowds. Women ululated, men gathered to shake hands, and children peeked shyly at the newcomers who looked both familiar and foreign. Peter's childhood home had been renovated in preparation for their arrival. A modern building now stood where his father's mud house once was, though he had insisted on maintaining the traditional compound layout. The first day passed in a whirlwind of greetings, unpacking, and settling in. Sandra was overwhelmed by the warmth of their welcome, though the lack of consistent electricity and internet connection concerned her. Junior was fascinated by the village boys playing football with a makeshift ball, while Mary couldn't stop taking pictures of everything she saw. As night approached, the family was exhausted from their long journey and the day's activities. They had brought numerous pairs of shoes, sleek leather shoes, designer sneakers, and comfortable sandals, all of which they habitually left on the front porch of their house, as they would in their Maryland home. Peter, whose memories of village customs had faded like old photographs, failed to remember the cardinal rule of Okafor: no footwear outside after dark. That night, the village experienced something it hadn't witnessed in decades. The sky, usually star-studded and peaceful, turned ominous. Thunder rolled across the heavens without a drop of rain, and flashes of lightning illuminated the village in stark, frightening bursts. The air grew thick with an unexplainable presence that made even the bravest village dogs cower in fear. Inside their homes, villagers whispered prayers and clutched their children close, knowing what this supernatural display meant. The spirits of the evil forest, dormant for so long, had been awakened. By morning, all of Peter's family's footwear had vanished, leaving only faint, smoky marks where they had been. The consequences were swift and severe. Peter awoke to find his entire family racked with a mysterious illness. Sandra's temperature soared, Junior complained of blinding headaches, and Mary's usually energetic spirit was replaced by a listlessness that scared her parents. Peter himself felt as though his body was made of lead, his joints aching with every movement. News spread quickly through the village, carried on whispers and worried glances. Soon, a crowd gathered around the Okafor compound, led by the village elders. Among them was Chief Izudu, who had been Peter's father's close friend, and Dibia Okonkwo, the village's chief priest, whose knowledge of traditional medicine and spiritual matters was renowned throughout the region. Dibia Okonkwo's examination of the family was thorough and solemn. He burned special herbs, chanted incantations in ancient dialect, and consulted his sacred cowries. Finally, he revealed what the villagers had already suspected. The family had violated one of the village's most sacred traditions, and the spirits had taken offense. "Peter, my son," the chief priest spoke, his voice heavy with concern, "you have forgotten the ways of our fathers. The footwear of a person carries their essence, their chi. To leave them outside is to invite malevolent spirits to steal not just the shoes, but parts of your soul." As the chief priest spoke, memories flooded back to Peter. His father's stern warnings, his mother's careful reminder each evening, the stories of travelers who had ignored this tradition and faced dire consequences. He had dismissed these as superstitions, viewing them through the lens of his Western education and Christian faith. Now, watching his family suffer, doubt crept into his mind. The remedy, according to Dibia Okonkwo, would require significant sacrifice. The list of items needed for the cleansing ritual was long: a pure white goat, special chalk from the sacred hills, kola nuts of varying types, palm wine from a specific palm grove, and other items that had to be sourced from specific places at specific times. Peter, despite his initial skepticism, spared no expense in acquiring everything required. The ritual itself took place over 3 days, during which the chief priest performed elaborate ceremonies, made sacrifices, and conducted cleansing rites. The entire village participated, understanding the gravity of the situation and the importance of appeasing the angry spirits. On the 3rd day, as the final sacrifices were made and the last prayers were said, a remarkable change came over the Okafor family. Their symptoms began to disappear as quickly as they had come. Sandra's fever broke, Junior's headaches vanished, and Mary's energy returned. Even Peter felt the heaviness leave his body, replaced by a vitality he hadn't felt since their arrival. The experience transformed Peter's understanding of his heritage. He had thought that his success in America, his education, and his embrace of Christianity had somehow elevated him above the traditional beliefs of his people. Now he understood that these traditions weren't mere superstitions, but contained deep wisdom about maintaining harmony between the physical and spiritual worlds. Sandra, too, gained a new perspective. As an African American, she had romanticized African traditions while simultaneously viewing them through a modernized lens. The reality she encountered in Umuokoro, where the spiritual and physical worlds intertwined in daily life, gave her a profound appreciation for the complexity and depth of African traditional religion. Junior and Mary's attitudes underwent the most dramatic change. Initially embarrassed by what they saw as primitive customs, they now found themselves fascinated by the rich tapestry of traditions that had protected their father's people for generations. They began to ask questions about other customs, eager to learn and understand. The incident became a turning point in how the Okafor family approached their time in Umuokoro. They embraced the village customs with newfound respect, particularly the evening ritual of bringing in footwear. Peter even found himself explaining the tradition to other visiting diaspora families, emphasizing the importance of maintaining cultural practices even in a changing world. As their Christmas holiday continued, the family discovered that this was just one of many traditions that contained deeper meaning than surface observation might suggest. They learned about the significance of breaking kola nut, the proper way to greet elders, and the importance of maintaining harmony with both the seen and unseen worlds. The story of the Okafor family's experience spread beyond Umuokoro, carried by traders and travelers to neighboring villages and towns.
It became a powerful reminder that African traditional practices weren't relics of the past, but living wisdom that continued to govern the relationship between people and their spiritual environment. When it was time for the family to return to America, they left with more than just memories. They carried with them a deeper understanding of their heritage and the knowledge that some traditions persist not because people are unwilling to change, but because they contain truths that transcend time and cultural shifts. Back in Maryland, Peter installed a shoe rack inside their front door, a simple reminder of their experience in Umuokoro. Sometimes, when friends asked about it, he would share their story, watching as understanding dawned in their eyes, the realization that in an age of smartphones and social media, there were still places where the boundary between the physical and spiritual worlds was thin, and where ancient wisdom continued to protect those who respected it. Years later, Mary would write a college essay about their experience in Umuokoro, reflecting on how it had changed her perspective on tradition and modernity. In our rush to embrace the new, she wrote, "We sometimes forget that our ancestors' practices weren't random superstitions, but carefully crafted responses to realities we might no longer perceive, but that continue to affect us." The tradition of bringing in footwear at night continues in Umuokoro to this day. New generations learn the practice from their parents, and visitors are carefully instructed about this important custom. Some might question why such a practice persists in the modern age, but the villagers of Umuokoro know better. They understand that some traditions serve as bridges between worlds, maintaining delicate balances that modern science might not yet comprehend.
Answer: as the sun sets each evening over Umuokoro, you can still see people hurrying to gather their footwear, bringing them safely inside before darkness falls. It's a simple act, one that might seem insignificant to an outsider, but it carries within it centuries of wisdom and a reminder that sometimes the old ways are preserved not because people fear change, but because they contain truths that remain relevant even in our modern world.
The story of Peter Okafor and his family serves as a testament to this wisdom, a reminder that progress doesn't always mean abandoning tradition, but rather understanding its deeper purpose and finding ways to honor it in a changing world. In the end, it's not about choosing between tradition and modernity, but about finding the wisdom to know which practices carry eternal truths that transcend time and change. As the elders of Umuokoro often say, the footprints of our ancestors may fade from the earth, but their wisdom lives on in the traditions they left behind. And sometimes, as Peter and his family learned, that wisdom might just save your life.